Maar wat we ook willen doen vandaag is jullie eigenlijk mededelen en een kijkje geven in de visie die wij hebben als Plantronics. En met name het basisprincipe hoe wij eigenlijk mensen veel slimmer kunnen laten werken, hoe we ze helderder kunnen laten communiceren met onze middelen die we hebben. Dus dat is een heel belangrijk. En als laatste denk ik dat het ook heel belangrijk is dat jullie met z'n allen een beetje gevoel krijgen van ja, wie zijn nu die mensen van Plantronics? Wat voor bedrijven zit, wat voor werkgever, wie werken daar? Dus daar willen we eigenlijk ook een inzicht in geven en in het team wat we zeg maar in de Benelux en in de Nordics hebben gebouwd. Dus dat is met name waar we het vandaag over gaan hebben qua doelstelling. Ik ga even door de agenda heen lopen. Want we hebben een redelijk strak schema. Allereerst zal dadelijk Paul Clark die zal een korte overview geven. Vervolgens zal morgen de uitleg geven over Contextual Intelligence. Jaap Hartse alles over de Bluetooth technologie uitleggen. En vervolgens zal ik zeg maar de nieuwe productlaunches en het nieuwe team in de Benelux zal ik toelichten. En op het eind is er eigenlijk nog een Q&A is er ingepland. Mochten er hele prangende vragen zijn, dan stel ze tussendoor, daar heb ik absoluut geen moeite mee. Mocht het heel erg in detail zijn of specialistisch, dan parkeren we die graag voor de Q&A. Dus, schroom niet om tussendoor te vragen natuurlijk. Dus dat is de agenda. We hebben een strak schema, dus ik zal als timekeeper goed naar de tijd kijken. We hebben ongeveer een uur hebben we hiervoor ingepland. Dus dan wil ik eigenlijk nu het woord geven aan Paul Clark.
So good morning everyone, and I should say welcome to Amsterdam, but it's probably your home more than it is my home. So this is the only part of the presentation that you're going to get in English. The rest is going to be in Dutch, since we strengthened our organisation. We have a very strong presence now in Holland. Plantronics, some of you may well be familiar with. We're a business that's been around since 1963. Started up by two pilots, and in our early days we were a business that was really focused on mission critical applications. Airline pilots setting up for air traffic control, where our headsets are still used today. Space missions. Neil Armstrong sadly passed away a couple of weeks ago, but he was a very famous user of Plantronics products. We were used all the way through the shuttle space missions as well, and of course in emergency services. But we're used as products in a much wider range of applications today. In general business, you'll find Plantronics products in contact center applications, front of house for many businesses, but also in environments where people like ourselves are using products in what I consider to be business critical applications, where we're collaborating, but we need to do that to make our businesses moved forward. The trend in business per se is that we're all becoming more mobile. It's very rare now to go to your office and sit there for a whole day. In fact, in research from Plantronics, we found that knowledge workers, only about 10% of them, never move out of the office. The remaining 90% move in some degree, and in fact 45% of the knowledge worker workforce spend at least 25% of the time out of the office. So we're becoming a much more mobile organisation, but we still talk with each other. So collaboration is still there, it always has been, but we're just doing it in a more dispersed fashion. And a wonderful example of that is the rise in the use of conference calls. The bane of my life, of course. I spend a lot of my time on conference calls, but I'm not alone. Otherwise, who would I be having the calls with? We know from research carried out by Plantronics that 83% of knowledge workers regularly or frequently spend time on conference calls, and that's been rising dramatically over the last 10 years and is set to continue to rise over the coming years. Forecasts are for voice communications, for voice conferencing, for it to continue to rise at least by 15% as a compound annual growth rate. So that collaboration trend is certainly here to stay. And in fact to grow. Where we're collaborating from is also changing. Technology is wonderful because it's unleashing us outside of our offices, and I mentioned that we are spending more and more time out of the offices. Some people still stay in the office, I mentioned 10%, but 90% are out. Where are we? We're in airports, we're in our cars, our mobile phones allow us to do that. We're in cafes. It's very common now when you go to a Starbucks or a Costa or any one of the many coffee shops you have here in Amsterdam, and find people sitting on telephone calls, conversations, conference calls with colleagues, or even perhaps just with friends. So collaboration in a dispersed fashion is here, very strong work trend. What's absolutely true is that voice remains critical. In those environments I mentioned, the freedom to join in calls and to collaborate in a wide variety of locations means that you're now taking calls, you're now involved in conferencing in environments that perhaps were never thought and set that way. By way of example, I'm sure all of you have been on conference calls where there's somebody on the call who's sitting in a coffee shop, and you can hear children crying, you can hear the clanking of sounds. Plantronics can play a part in improving people's ability to have that dispersed collaboration by improving noise cancelling. So voice is at the centre, but audio is absolutely critical, and quality of audio is key. I said audio is key. Research, well known to anyone in the audio area, tells us that when we have face-to-face communications, about 55% of what we communicate comes from body language. Okay, whether I like it or not, you'll have made assertions about me based on how I've stood here and how I've interacted with you. About 37% comes from the tone of voice, and that's the pace, the pause, the pitch, and the clarity of what you hear from me. And only 7% of what is communicated is the actual words. Okay? When you move to a dispersed collaboration environment, it changes dramatically. For one thing, you no longer have that face-to-face, so you can't use body language. Okay, unless you're on video, and use of video is actually quite small at the moment relative to the dispersed collaboration that exists. What happens is, I mentioned that the actual words were 7% in the face-to-face environment. That increases to 13% when you're no longer looking at the person. The tone of voice, that pace, pause, power, and the clarity of the communication expands to be 87% of the impact of the communication. So audio is absolutely critical in a dispersed collaboration environment. Another thing that we're seeing in terms of a trend is, of course, the devices that people use to communicate is ever expanding, and it's no longer that you picked up the old dog and bone, as we say in the UK, dialed a number and made a call. Of course, you can use your mobile phone. They've been around for 25 years plus, but they're getting more and more complex, and it's rare to see someone with a simple mobile phone. Even my children now have smartphones, very complex devices. We use tablets. We use PCs. These are all things in the mix of our communication. So the complexity is increasing. And one of the roles that Plantronics play is to bring that complexity and convergence and simplify it. One area of simplification that we have worked on in Plantronics is in the area of context. And I'd like to hand over to Morgan de Ruta, one of our heads of in Plantronics, to talk a little bit more about contextual intelligence.